You've been taught that Paul Revere rode alone at midnight yelling, "The British are coming." But that version, it's a lie. The real story is more chaotic, more dangerous, and far more interesting. You've probably heard the story of Paul Revere racing through the colonial countryside, yelling about how the British were approaching. However, Paul Revere wasn't the only patriot on horseback. So why do we only remember his name? Real quick though, we are trying to hit 100 subs by September. We're already halfway there, so if you like history, hit that subscribe button. But anyways, back to the video. You see, the plan of warning rebel leaders of British retribution had been well thought out. Paul Revere and William Dawes set out at around 9 p.m. on April 18, 1775. They had set out from Boston on separate sides of the city, hoping that at least one of them would be able to sneak past British patrols. William Dawes had the longer journey, while Paul Revere had the more direct route to Lexington. The plan was to reach John Hancock and Samuel Adams, who were residing in Lexington at the time. Their secondary goal, though, was to alert other riders so that as many people would be aware of England's presence as possible. The two messengers combined alerted 40 patriots who continued to spread the word on horseback. Paul Revere reached Hancock and Adams first, but Dawes was not far behind because he arrived just 30 minutes later. The duo set off from their main objective after having some food and drink. But not long after leaving, they met Dr. Samuel Prescott, who was a son of liberty, a patriot through and through. He helped them continue the journey towards Concord, Massachusetts. The English army knew that Concord was home to one of the largest caches of militia supplies. From a strategic point of view, the early patriots could not allow it to be captured. But one of the riders didn't make it, because what happened next might be the most shocking part of the story. Before they could make it to Concord, they got stopped by a British Army patrol at a roadblock. The three men understood that at least one of them needed to make it to Concord. The warning they carried was vital to the success of the American cause. The group quickly dispersed in different directions. Revere was the only one to be captured. Dawes and Dr. Prescott escaped, but unfortunately Dawes was thrown off his horse, and so while he was not captured by the British, he still did not complete his mission. Prescott, on the other hand, succeeded in jumping his horse over a stone wall and galloped into the nearby woods. He made it to Concord and helped alert the local militia. The midnight ride had taken a wild turn of events, but what they believed they were riding for was even crazier. The American rebels had received word that the British was moving to imprison or kill John Hancock and Sam Adams, as well as confiscate the Concord cache. The English General Gage had received word that he was, in fact, to do those things. But General Gage feared the American people. He wanted to follow his orders, but he believed that the colonists would rebel even more if he captured the rebel leaders. In fact, he ordered the officer in charge of the operation to, quote, "take care that the soldiers do not plunder the inhabitants or hurt private property." But that's where it gets messy. Revere's mission might have failed entirely if it were not for one anonymous hero. Revere rode late on the night of April 18, 1775, and on the following morning, the Patriots had won the battles of Lexington and Concord, the very first battles of the Revolutionary War. It came down to Israel Bissell to alert Connecticut that the war had begun. He rode 345 miles in the span of just over 4 days on multiple horses. This man was the reason an entire colony knew that the revolution had started. Just for reference, Revere had only traveled 10 miles to Lexington. Bissell traveled faster and farther than any of the other riders I have already mentioned, and yet today, no one knows this man's name. So if Revere did not do it alone, why do we keep telling the story like he did? The whole idea of Paul Revere as a lone rider was done thanks to the poem written by Henry Longfellow prior to the Civil War. Longfellow was an abolitionist, and his poem was meant to unite the North to be courageous and take action against the injustice of the Southern states. It worked, but at what cost? Multiple men are completely forgotten about because of one successful work of art. And that is why it is so important for you to study history. Regardless of what anyone else says happened, you need to know the truth for yourself. But Dr. Prescott and Israel Bissell aren't the only ones that history forgot, because most of the men who signed the Declaration of Independence completely vanished from history. You've heard of Jefferson and you've heard of Franklin, but what happened to the other 53 signers? Well, that's what we uncover next.